The wrench slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the concrete garage floor. Through the thin walls of our modest two-story house, I could hear Aven's voice cutting through the evening air like a blade. "You disgust me, Keaton. I'd rather kiss our dog than you." I stood there in my grease-stained coveralls, staring at the underside of my battered F-150, and felt something inside me finally break. Not my heart. That had been cracking for months. This was different. This was the last thread of whatever foolish hope I'd been clinging to. "My name is Keaton Merren, and I'm a car mechanic. 42 years old, calloused hands, permanently stained fingernails, and apparently married to a woman who finds me repulsive. Aven Merren, my wife of 15 years, is a lawyer. Sharp suits, sharper tongue, and lately, a schedule that keeps her away from home more nights than not." I picked up the wrench and continued working on the truck's transmission. The familiar rhythm of turning bolts and checking fluid levels helped steady my nerves. Outside, I could hear Aven talking to someone on the phone. Her voice had shifted from disgusted to honey-sweet, the way it used to sound when she talked to me. "I can't wait to see you tomorrow," she purred. "Keaton will be at the shop all day." The wrench froze in my hand. I held my breath and listened. No, he doesn't suspect anything. He's too busy playing with his little cars to notice what's happening right under his nose. A laugh. Soft, intimate. The kind of laugh she used to share with me. I set the wrench down carefully and walked to the side window of the garage. Through the kitchen window, I could see Aven pacing back and forth, her phone pressed to her ear. She was wearing the blue dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year, the one she claimed she'd lost. "Rex, you're terrible," she giggled. "But yes, I'll wear that thing you like, the red one." Rex. I knew that name. Rex Harrow, the real estate mogul who owned half the commercial properties downtown. Smooth talker, expensive suits, and a reputation for getting whatever he wanted. I backed away from the window and leaned against my workbench. The garage suddenly felt too small, too cramped. Tools I'd organized meticulously seemed to mock me from their neat rows on the pegboard. This space had been my sanctuary, the one place where everything made sense. Now it felt like a hiding spot for a fool. The kitchen door slammed, and I heard Aven's heels clicking across the hardwood floors upstairs. A few minutes later, water started running in the master bathroom. She was taking another one of her long showers, the kind that had become routine after her late nights at the office. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our recent text exchanges. Brief, functional messages about groceries and bills. When had we stopped talking about anything that mattered? When had I become just another item on her to-do list? The shower was still running when I made my decision. I walked into the house and climbed the stairs to our bedroom. Aven's laptop sat open on her side of the bed, screen dark but still warm. She'd always been careless with technology, assuming I was too simple to understand her digital world. I touched the trackpad, and the screen lit up. Her email was still open, and my stomach dropped as I saw the preview of the most recent message. "Can't stop thinking about this afternoon. Kay is working late again tomorrow. My place, 7 p.m. R." I scrolled down. There were dozens of messages, going back months. Some were just flirtatious banter, but others were explicit enough to make me close the laptop and step away. The shower stopped. I heard Aven humming, as she moved around the bathroom. When was the last time she'd been that happy at home? I went to the closet and pulled out my old duffel bag from the top shelf. Dust particles danced in the overhead light as I shook it out. Methodically, I began packing clothes. Not everything. I didn't want to tip her off. Just enough for a few days. From the bathroom came the sound of hairdryer. Aven would spend another 20 minutes on her nighttime routine, giving me plenty of time to gather what I needed. I went to my desk in the corner of the bedroom and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a folder I'd prepared months ago, back when I first started suspecting something was wrong. Financial documents, copies of our important papers, and a draft of something I'd hoped I'd never need to use. The hairdryer stopped. I slipped the folder into my bag and zipped it closed. Aven emerged from the bathroom in her silk robe, her hair perfectly styled, even though she was supposedly going to bed. She glanced at me but didn't speak. We'd been living like strangers for weeks now, sharing space but nothing else. "Working late tomorrow?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. She didn't even look up from her phone. "Probably. Big case coming up." I nodded and headed for the door. "I'll be in the garage for a while." "Whatever." I paused at the threshold and looked back at her. She was already absorbed in her phone again, probably texting Rex about their plans. 15 years of marriage, and this was how it ended, with her dismissive whatever and the glow of her screen lighting up her face. In the garage, I finished packing my tools into a smaller toolbox, the important ones, the ones I'd need if I had to start over somewhere else. Then I sat in the driver's seat of my truck and pulled out my phone. The number I dialed belonged to someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year, not since the falling out between her and Aven. But desperate times called for desperate measures. "Lyra, it's Keaton. I know it's late, but I need to ask you something." Lyra Ventrix was Aven's younger sister, though you'd never know it from how they treated each other. Where Aven was cold and calculating, Lyra was warm and impulsive. She was an artist, living in a converted warehouse downtown, making just enough from her paintings to get by. "Keaton, is everything okay?" I could hear music in the background, probably jazz. Lyra always had music playing. "No, everything's not okay. Listen, I need a favor, a big one. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? There's something I need to do and I could use a witness." A pause. "This is about Aven, isn't it?" "Yeah, it is." Another pause, longer this time. "What time?" 9 a.m., at the house." "I'll be there." I hung up and sat in the quiet garage for a long time, listening to the house settle around me. Upstairs, I could hear Aven moving around, probably getting ready for another night in the guest room. She'd been sleeping there for a week, claiming I snored too loudly. At 11:30, I heard her bedroom door close. At midnight, I started my truck and backed out of the driveway. The house looked smaller in my rearview mirror, less significant somehow, like a place I used to know but no longer belonged to. I drove to the all-night diner on the edge of town and ordered coffee that tasted like motor oil. The waitress was a woman named Dolores who'd been working the night shift there for as long as I could remember. She didn't ask questions, just kept my cup full and left me alone with my thoughts. At 6 a.m., I drove across town to the office of Harold Martinez, the notary who opened early for clients who needed privacy. Harold had handled some paperwork for my shop over the years, and he understood discretion. "You sure about this, Keaton?" he asked as I signed the documents. "I'm sure." The papers were simple but effective. Power of attorney, beneficiary changes, financial authorizations, all the legal tools I'd need to protect myself from whatever Aven might try to do when she realized her safety net was gone. At 8:30, I called Lyra again. "You ready for this?" I asked. "I've been ready for years," she replied. "Aven had this coming." I met Lyra at the coffee shop 2 blocks from my house. She was wearing jeans and a paint-stained sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked like a younger, softer version of Aven, but with genuine warmth in her eyes. "Before we do this," she said, sliding into the booth across from me, "I need to tell you something. I've known about Rex for months." I set down my coffee cup. "You knew?" "I saw them together at that new restaurant downtown. I was going to tell you, but—" She shrugged. "I figured you already knew, and were just waiting for the right time to do something about it." I suspected, but knowing for sure is different. Lyra reached across the table and touched my hand. "She doesn't deserve you, Keaton. She never did." At exactly 9 a.m., we walked up the front steps of my house. I could see Aven's car in the driveway, which meant she was still home. Perfect. I used my key to open the front door and called out, "Aven, I'm home." Footsteps on the stairs. Aven appeared at the top, wearing her robe and a confused expression. Keaton, what are you doing here? I thought you were… She stopped when she saw Lyra behind me. What is she doing here? We need to talk, I said. Aven came down the stairs slowly, her eyes moving between Lyra and me. If this is about last night, I was just frustrated. You know how I get when I'm stressed about work. I pulled the manila envelope from my jacket and set it on the kitchen counter. This isn't about last night, Aven. This is about Rex. The color drained from her face. I don't know what you're talking about. Rex Harrow. Your place, 7 p.m.? The red thing he likes. I watched her face crumble as she realized I'd heard everything. Should I keep going? Lyra stepped forward, and for the first time, Aven noticed the ring on her finger. A simple silver band, but it caught the morning light streaming through the kitchen window. What is that? Aven whispered. That, I said, opening the envelope and spreading the documents across the counter, is your replacement. Aven stared at the papers, her lawyer's training kicking in as she scanned the legal language. I watched her face change as she understood what she was looking at. You can't do this, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Already done. Signed, witnessed, and notarized as of 7 a.m. this morning. I pointed to Lyra. Meet your replacement as my power of attorney, my emergency contact, and the beneficiary of everything we built together. Aven's hand shook as she picked up the papers. Keaton, please. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can't do anything, I interrupted. You made your choice when you decided Rex was more interesting than your husband. I turned to leave, but Aven grabbed my arm. Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. I'm going to live my life without someone who finds me disgusting. I gently removed her hand and walked toward the door. Lyra followed, her heels clicking on the hardwood just like Aven's had the night before. Keaton! Aven called after us. You can't just leave. We need to talk about this. I paused at the door and looked back at her one last time. She was standing in the kitchen in her silk robe, surrounded by legal documents that had just turned her world upside down. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. You're right, I said. We do need to talk. But first you need to call Rex and cancel your date tonight. You're going to be busy dealing with lawyers. I closed the door behind me and walked to my truck. Through the kitchen window, I could see Aven frantically reading through the papers, probably looking for some loophole or mistake that would give her back the control she'd just lost. She wouldn't find one. I'd been planning this for too long to leave anything to chance. Lyra's warehouse apartment was nothing like the house I'd shared with Aven. Where Aven preferred clean lines and neutral colors, Lyra surrounded herself with chaos and creativity. Canvases covered every wall, some finished, others half-completed works in progress. The smell of oil paint and turpentine mixed with coffee and something that might have been incense. Make yourself at home, Lyra said, clearing a stack of art books from the couch. Sorry about the mess. I wasn't expecting a roommate. I set my duffel bag down and looked around. In the corner, an easel held a painting of a stormy seascape, dark clouds swirling over choppy waves. It was beautiful and angry at the same time. That's how I've been feeling lately, Lyra said, noticing my attention. Like there's a storm coming. The storm's already here, I replied. We're just cleaning up the damage now. My phone buzzed. Text message from Aven. We need to talk. This is ridiculous. Come home. I showed the message to Lyra, who snorted. She still thinks she's in control. Another buzz. I know you're upset, but running away isn't going to solve anything. Then another. Keaton, please, I made a mistake, but we can fix this. I turned off my phone and slipped it into my pocket. She's going to keep trying, Lyra warned. Aven doesn't give up easily. Neither do I said. She just hasn't figured that out yet. Lyra made coffee while I unpacked my few belongings. The guest room was small but comfortable, with a window that looked out over the industrial part of town. I could see the sign for Merren's Automotive in the distance, the shop I'd built from nothing over the past 12 years. "Can I ask you something?" Lyra said, handing me a mug of coffee that was strong enough to strip paint. "Why me? I mean, I'm glad you called, but Aven and I haven't spoken in over a year." I sat down at her kitchen table, a scarred wooden surface covered with paint stains and coffee rings. "That's exactly why I called you. You're the only person I know who sees Aven for what she really is." Lyra sat across from me, cradling her own mug. "She wasn't always like this, you know. When we were kids, she was different, warmer. But somewhere along the way, she decided that caring about people was a weakness." "What happened between you two?" Lyra's expression darkened. "She cost me my shot at a real career. 3 years ago, I had a chance to show my work at a gallery in Chicago. Big opportunity, could have changed everything. But Aven convinced me it was a scam, that I was being naive. She even threatened to cut me off financially if I went through with it." "Why would she do that?" "Because she couldn't stand the idea of her little sister succeeding at something she couldn't control. Turns out the gallery was legitimate. The artist they chose instead of me is now showing in New York." I studied Lyra's face, seeing the hurt that still lingered there. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." "Aven's good at making people think she's protecting them when she's really protecting herself." Lyra took a sip of coffee. "So when you called last night, asking for help with whatever you were planning, I didn't even hesitate." My phone started ringing. Aven's name appeared on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. "You should probably answer," Lyra said. "Let her dig her own grave a little deeper." I picked up on the fourth ring. "What do you want, Aven?" "I want my husband to come home so we can discuss this like adults." Her voice had that controlled, lawyer-like quality she used when she was trying to intimidate someone. "I'm not your husband anymore," I said. "I'm just the guy whose name is still on the mortgage. Don't be dramatic. You can't just dissolve a 15-year marriage because of one mistake." "One mistake?" I laughed, and it came out harsher than I intended. "Aven, I saw your email. Months of messages with Rex. This isn't a mistake. It's a pattern." Silence on the other end. Then, "You went through my personal things?" "Your laptop was open. Hard to miss when your boyfriend is sending you explicit messages about your afternoon activities. That's a violation of my privacy. And having an affair is a violation of our marriage vows. I guess we're both guilty of something." Lyra was grinning at me from across the table, giving me a thumbs up. "Keaton, please." Aven's voice softened, taking on the tone she used when she wanted something. "Come home. We'll talk this through. I'll end things with Rex, and we can start over." "Why would you end things with Rex? According to your messages, he's everything I'm not. Sophisticated, wealthy, exciting. He doesn't mean anything to me." "Then you're even more pathetic than I thought." I hung up and turned off the phone again. "Harsh," Lyra said, but she was still smiling. "I like this version of you. This is who I've always been. I just forgot for a while." The next few days fell into a routine. I went to work at the shop, dealing with the usual parade of broken transmissions and engine troubles. My employees, 2 guys named Danny and Mike who'd been with me for years, could tell something was different, but they didn't pry. That's one thing I'd always liked about working with mechanics. We understood that sometimes a man needed space to work through his problems. Aven tried calling several more times, but I let them all go to voicemail. The messages started angry, then became pleading, then shifted back to angry. She was cycling through all the tactics she'd used to manipulate me over the years, but none of them were working anymore. On Thursday evening, I was having dinner with Lyra when she brought up something I'd been avoiding thinking about. "Have you talked to Nina lately?" Nina was my 17-year-old daughter from my first marriage. She lived with her mother in the next town over, but she'd always been close to Aven. Too close, in my opinion. Not since this started, I admitted. I figured Aven would tell her some version of what happened. Probably not the true version. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Nina's number. Before I could change my mind, I hit call. "Dad?" Nina's voice was cold, distant. "Mom told me what you did." "Which mom? Your real mom or Aven?" "Don't be gross. Aven called me crying yesterday. She said you left her for some other woman and you're trying to steal all her money." I closed my eyes and counted to 10. "Nina, that's not what happened." "Then why don't you tell me your version?" So I did. I told her about the phone call I'd overheard, about the emails, about months of being treated like a stranger in my own home. I kept it clean. She was still my daughter, but I made sure she understood that Aven was the one who had betrayed our family. When I finished, there was a long silence. "I don't believe you," Nina finally said. "Aven would never do something like that. She loves you." "Nina." "No, Dad. I think you're having some kind of midlife crisis, and you're trying to make Aven the villain so you don't have to feel guilty about abandoning your family." The line went quiet. She'd hung up on me. I set the phone down and stared at it. Lyra reached across the table and touched my hand. "She'll come around," she said. "When she's older, she'll understand." Maybe, or maybe Aven will poison her against me permanently. Aven's good at manipulation, but she's not that good. The truth has a way of coming out. That night, I lay awake in Lyra's guest room, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the wreckage of my life. 15 years of marriage, gone. My relationship with my daughter, damaged, maybe beyond repair. All because I'd finally found the courage to stop accepting less than I deserved. But as I thought about it more, I realized I wasn't sad. I was angry. Aven had taken years of my life. Years I could have spent with someone who actually wanted to be with me. She'd made me feel small and unworthy while she carried on with Rex behind my back. And now she was trying to turn my own daughter against me. The anger felt good, clean and sharp and energizing. For the first time in months, I had a sense of purpose. Aven wanted a fight. She was going to get one. But first, I needed to know more about Rex Harrow. If I was going to destroy my wife's affair, I needed to understand who I was dealing with. Friday morning, I called in sick to work and drove downtown to the coffee shop across from Rex's office building. It was one of those gleaming glass towers that had sprouted up during the city's recent gentrification push, all sharp angles and reflective surfaces that made the older buildings around it look shabby by comparison. I sat by the window with a newspaper and waited. At 9:15, a black BMW pulled up to the curb and Rex Harrow stepped out. He was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. He moved with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no, never had to worry about money or consequences or other people's feelings. I watched him stride into the building like he owned it, which, according to the directory in the lobby, he pretty much did. Harrow Development occupied the top 3 floors. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "Stop following my boyfriend, you pathetic loser." I looked around the coffee shop, but I didn't see anyone who looked like they were watching me. Then I noticed the security camera mounted above the entrance to Rex's building. Someone had been monitoring the feed. I typed back, "Tell your boyfriend I said hello." The response came immediately. "Stay away from Rex, or you'll regret it." I stood up, walked to the window, and waved at the camera. Then I got in my truck and drove home. When I walked into Lyra's apartment, I found her standing at her easel, working on a new painting. This one was different from her usual style, darker, more violent. It showed a woman in a business suit, standing in a burning building, her face calm even as flames consumed everything around her. "That's not subtle," I said. "I'm not feeling subtle today." Lyra set down her brush and turned to face me. How did your reconnaissance mission go? Rex knows I was watching him. Someone sent me threatening texts. Probably Aven. She always was paranoid about people discovering her secrets. I showed Lyra the messages. She read them and laughed. She's scared, Lyra said. Good. She should be. Why should she be scared? She's got Rex. She's got her career. She's got my daughter thinking I'm the villain. Seems like she's winning. Lyra smiled, and for the first time since I'd known her, the expression looked genuinely dangerous. She's winning because you've been playing defense, she said. But what if you stopped defending and started attacking? What do you mean? I mean it's time to show Aven that she's not the only one who knows how to play dirty. Saturday morning brought the first real test of my resolve. I was drinking coffee in Lyra's kitchen when someone started pounding on the warehouse door downstairs. The knocking was aggressive, impatient, the kind of sound someone makes when they're used to getting immediate attention. That'll be Aven, Lyra said, not looking up from her newspaper. Right on schedule. I looked at my watch. 8:30 a.m. How did you know she'd come here? Because she's predictable. She spent all week trying to control the situation from a distance. And when that didn't work, she decided to confront you face to face. The pounding continued, echoing through the warehouse space below us. Keaton! Aven's voice carried up through the floor. I know you're up there. We need to talk. I started toward the stairs, but Lyra grabbed my arm. Let her wait, she said. Let her get good and frustrated first. Keaton! More pounding. This is ridiculous. You can't hide from me forever. After 5 minutes, the noise stopped. I heard footsteps moving around the building, probably Aven checking for other ways in. Then her voice again, but from a different direction. Lyra, open this door right now. Now she's trying to intimidate me, Lyra said. That's rich. I walked to the window and looked down. Aven was standing in the alley behind the building, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual business attire. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she looked like she hadn't slept well. Good. I'm going down there, I said. You sure? Once you open that door, there's no going back to the peaceful part of this divorce. The peaceful part ended when she chose Rex over me. I walked downstairs and opened the back door. Aven was leaning against her car, arms crossed, trying to look casual, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the tightness around her eyes. There you are, she said. I was starting to think you'd crawled into a hole somewhere. What do you want, Aven? I want to know what the hell you think you're doing. I've been trying to reach you for a week. I got your messages, all of them. Then why haven't you responded? I leaned against the doorframe and studied her face. She looked smaller somehow, less imposing than she had in our kitchen the week before. Maybe it was the casual clothes, or maybe it was the fact that she was the one asking for something now. Because I don't have anything to say to you. We're married, Keaton. We have 15 years of history together. That has to count for something. It counted for something right up until you decided Rex was more interesting than your husband. Aven's jaw tightened. I made a mistake. People make mistakes. That doesn't mean you throw away everything we built together. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk on the way home. Having an affair for months while treating your husband like garbage is a choice. Fine. I made a bad choice. I'm trying to fix it. By lying to my daughter about what really happened? Aven's expression flickered, just for a second. But I caught it. Guilt, maybe, or just annoyance at being caught. Nina called me upset, she said. I tried to explain the situation in a way that wouldn't hurt her. You told her I left you for another woman and that I'm trying to steal your money. I was emotional. I said things I shouldn't have said. Like you said things you shouldn't have said to Rex? All those messages about how disgusting I am, how pathetic I am, how glad you'll be when this marriage is over? Aven straightened up, and I saw a flash of the cold, calculating woman I'd been living with for the past year. You had no right to read my private communications. And you had no right to betray our marriage. But here we are. We stared at each other across the narrow alley. A year ago, this would have been the moment when I backed down, when I apologized for being unreasonable and tried to find some way to make peace. But that man was gone, replaced by someone who'd finally learned to value himself. What do you want from me, Aven? What's the endgame here? I want you to come home. I want us to go to counseling and work through this. And Rex. I'll end it with Rex. You already ended it with Rex, yesterday, according to the text I intercepted. Aven's face went pale. How did you? Your phone forwards messages to your laptop, remember? The laptop you left open on the kitchen counter when you moved out. It was a lie, but a convincing one. The truth was that Lyra had some tech-savvy friends who'd helped us gain access to Aven's email account. But Aven didn't need to know that. So you know it's over, she said. I chose you. No, you chose damage control. There's a difference. I turned to go back inside, but Aven stepped forward. Wait. Just wait. Her voice cracked slightly. What do I have to do? What will it take for you to forgive me? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I looked back at her, this woman I'd loved for 15 years, and felt nothing but pity. There's nothing you can do, Aven. You can't fix Rex. You can't take back everything you said about me. You can't erase months of treating me like I was a burden you merely put up with. So that's it? You're just going to throw away our entire marriage because of a few months of problems? I'm not throwing away our marriage. You already did that. I'm just accepting reality. I went back inside and locked the door behind me. Through the window, I watched Aven stand in the alley for several minutes, staring at the building like she could will me to come back out. Finally, she got in her car and drove away. How did that go? Lyra asked when I got back upstairs. About like you'd expect. She wants to reconcile, but only because her affair fell apart. Rex dumped her? Yesterday, apparently. Probably got nervous when he realized I knew about them. Lyra nodded thoughtfully. That actually works in our favor. How do you figure? Because now she's desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. Over the next few days, Aven's desperation became increasingly obvious. She started showing up at my shop during business hours, creating scenes that made my employees uncomfortable and my customers curious. She called Lyra's apartment at all hours, leaving rambling voicemails that swung between pleading and threatening. On Tuesday, she tried a different approach. Mr. Merren? The voice on my shop phone was young, professional. This is Jennifer Walsh from Hartley, Morrison & Associates. I'm calling on behalf of your wife. Hartley, Morrison & Associates was the law firm where Aven worked. They handled corporate law mostly, but they had a divorce attorney on staff. What can I do for you, Ms. Walsh? Mrs. Merren would like to discuss a reconciliation agreement. She's prepared to make some significant concessions in exchange for your willingness to attend marriage counseling. What kind of concessions? I'm not at liberty to discuss the details over the phone, but I can tell you that she's prepared to be very generous regarding the division of assets. I almost laughed. Aven was trying to buy me back. Tell Mrs. Merren that I'm not interested in reconciliation on any terms. Mr. Merren, I think you should consider... Ms. Walsh, let me save us both some time. I don't want Aven's money. I don't want her apologies. I don't want her promises to change. I want her out of my life permanently. That's a very final position to take. Yes, it is. I hung up and went back to work on the engine I was rebuilding. But my concentration was broken. Aven was escalating, and that meant I needed to escalate too. That evening, I called Lyra from the shop. How do you feel about taking a drive? Where to? Rex Harrow's house. I think it's time he and I had a conversation. Rex lived in the hills outside town, in one of those sprawling modern houses that looked like it belonged in a magazine. all glass and steel and carefully landscaped grounds. His driveway was long and winding, lined with trees that probably cost more than most people's cars. The black BMW was parked in front of the house, along with a red sports car that I didn't recognize. "Looks like he has company," Lyra said. We parked at the bottom of the driveway and walked up to the front door. I could hear music and laughter from inside, a party, or at least a gathering of some kind. I rang the doorbell. The door opened, and Rex Harrow appeared, holding a glass of wine and wearing the kind of casual clothes that somehow cost more than formal wear. His expression shifted from pleasant host to annoyed recognition when he saw me. "Mr. Merren, this is unexpected." "I bet it is. Can we talk?" "I'm entertaining guests right now." "This won't take long." Rex glanced back into the house, probably weighing his options. Behind him, I could see well-dressed people moving around what looked like a living room the size of my entire shop. "5 minutes," he said, stepping outside and closing the door behind him. "I'll get right to the point," I said. "Stay away from my wife." Rex smiled, the kind of condescending expression rich men use when they're dealing with people they consider beneath them. "From what I understand, she's not your wife anymore. She's still legally my wife until the divorce is final." "And when will that be?" "When I decide it will be." Rex's smile faded slightly. "Mr. Merren, I think you're operating under some misconceptions about the situation. Enlighten me." "Aven and I had a brief relationship, yes. But it's over. Has been for several days. So your concerns are somewhat outdated. I know you dumped her. That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" I stepped closer to him, close enough that he had to tilt his head back slightly to maintain eye contact. "The point is that you helped destroy my marriage, and I don't like people who destroy things that belong to me. Your marriage was already over, Mr. Merren. I just helped speed up the inevitable." "Maybe, but you still played a part in it. And now you're going to pay for that." Rex straightened up, trying to regain some of his lost composure. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm making you a promise. You cost me 15 years of my life. I'm going to make sure you pay for that. Mr. Merren, I think you should leave before this conversation goes somewhere we'll both regret." "I'm not going to regret anything," I said. "But you might." I turned and walked back toward the truck, Lyra beside me. Behind us, I heard Rex go back into his house and close the door firmly. "That was subtle," Lyra said as we drove away. "Subtle is overrated. Sometimes you need to let people know exactly where they stand." "And where does Rex stand?" I smiled, feeling better than I had in weeks. "Right in my crosshairs." The next morning, I woke up to find 3 missed calls from an unknown number and a voicemail that made my coffee taste like ash. "Mr. Merren, this is Detective Ray Collins with the City Police. I need you to call me back regarding a complaint that was filed against you last night. Please contact me as soon as possible." I showed the message to Lyra, who was standing at her easel working on another dark painting. This one showed a man in coveralls standing over the wreckage of an expensive car. "Rex called the cops," she said without looking up from her canvas. "Predictable. What do you think they'll do?" "Probably nothing. You didn't actually threaten him with violence, and you left when he asked you to. But it shows he's rattled." I called Detective Collins and agreed to meet him at the station that afternoon. The conversation was brief and professional. Rex had reported that I'd come to his house and made vague threats, but when pressed for details, he couldn't point to anything specific I'd said that crossed the line into criminal territory. "Just stay away from Mr. Harrow," Detective Collins advised. "Whatever issues you have with him, work them out through lawyers, not late-night house calls." "Understood," I said. But as I left the police station, I realized that Rex's call to the cops had actually done me a favor. Now I knew he was scared enough to involve law enforcement, which meant he was taking me seriously. That was good. Fear made people stupid, and I needed Rex to make some stupid decisions. That evening, Lyra and I were having dinner when my phone rang. Nina's name appeared on the screen. "Dad, I need to talk to you." Her voice was different, smaller, younger than it had been during our last conversation. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I talked to Mom, my real mom. She told me some things about Aven that I didn't know. I felt a surge of gratitude toward my ex-wife. We'd had our problems, but she'd always been fair when it came to Nina. "What kind of things?" "About how Aven used to talk about you when you weren't around, about the way she treated you during family gatherings. Mom said she'd been worried about you for a long time." Nina paused and I could hear her crying softly. "I'm sorry, Dad. I should have believed you." "You don't need to apologize, Nina. Aven can be very convincing when she wants to be." "Are you really getting divorced?" "Yes." "And you're living with her sister?" "Temporarily. Lyra's been helping me through this." Another pause. "Can I come see you this weekend? I want to hear your side of everything." "Of course. I'd like that." After I hung up, Lyra smiled at me from across the table. "See? I told you the truth would come out. One down, several more to go." But Nina's call had given me an idea. If my ex-wife had been able to see through Aven's manipulation, maybe other people had too. Maybe I wasn't as isolated as I'd thought. The next day, I started making phone calls. Old friends, neighbors, people who'd known Aven and me as a couple over the years. I wasn't looking for sympathy or support. I was gathering intelligence. What I learned was illuminating. Tom Bradley, who lived next door to our house, told me he'd seen Rex's BMW in our driveway multiple times over the past few months, always when my truck wasn't there. Sarah Mitchell, who worked at the bank where Aven and I had our joint accounts, mentioned that Aven had been asking questions about separating our finances weeks before our confrontation. Most interesting was my conversation with Janet Reeves, who worked as a paralegal at Aven's law firm. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this," Janet said, "but Aven's been having problems at work. There was some kind of incident with a client a few weeks ago. Something about her personal life affecting her professional judgment." "What kind of incident?" "I don't know the details, but there was a meeting with the senior partners. Aven came out looking pretty shaken." That evening, I shared what I'd learned with Lyra. "So, she's been planning this divorce for weeks," Lyra said, "and her affair is affecting her career." "Looks that way." "Good. That gives us leverage." "What do you mean?" Lyra set down her paintbrush and turned to face me. "I mean it's time to stop reacting to what Aven does and start making her react to what we do." "I'm listening." "Aven's whole identity is built around being successful and in control. Her career, her reputation, her image in the community, that's what matters to her. So that's what we attack." "How?" "By making sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person she really is." The plan Lyra outlined was simple but effective. Instead of hiding from the gossip and speculation that was already swirling around town, we would feed it. Carefully, strategically, but relentlessly. It started with social media. Lyra had maintained friendships with several people who moved in Aven's professional and social circles. Through them, she began spreading carefully crafted stories about Aven's affair, her treatment of me, and her general character. Nothing that could be traced back to us directly, but enough to get people talking. Within a week, the effects were visible. I started getting sympathetic looks from people I barely knew. Cashiers at the grocery store, waitresses at restaurants, even strangers on the street seemed to know who I was and what had happened to me. More importantly, Aven was feeling the pressure. She called me twice, demanding that I stop spreading lies about her. When I pointed out that I hadn't spoken to anyone about our personal business, she accused me of having Lyra do my dirty work. "You're destroying my reputation," she said during our second conversation. "Your reputation is destroying itself," I replied. "I'm just not helping you cover it up anymore." This is harassment, Keaton. I can have you arrested. For what? Telling people the truth about what you did? For conducting a campaign of defamation against me. Prove it. She couldn't, of course. Everything that was being said about her was true, and the people saying it were just concerned friends and neighbors who'd witnessed her behavior over the years. But the pressure was definitely getting to her. Janet Reeves called me again to report that Aven had been seen crying in the bathroom at work. Tom Bradley mentioned that she'd been leaving the house at odd hours, sometimes not coming back until the next morning. She's unraveling, Lyra observed. The question is, how far are we going to push her? As far as it takes. And what does far enough look like to you? I thought about it for a moment. I want her to understand what it feels like to lose everything that matters to you. I want her to know what it's like to be humiliated and abandoned by the people you trust. That's dark, Keaton. She earned it. The opportunity to escalate came sooner than I expected. Nina visited that weekend, and during our conversation, she mentioned something that made my pulse quicken. Aven's been asking me to talk to you, Nina said. She wants me to convince you to take her back. What did you tell her? I told her I wasn't going to get involved, but she kept pushing, so finally I told her that maybe, if she hadn't been cheating on you, we wouldn't be having this conversation. How did she react to that? She got really angry, started saying that you'd poisoned me against her, that you were using me to get revenge. Then she said something really weird. What? She said that if you didn't stop trying to destroy her life, she'd make sure I never spoke to you again. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. Using my daughter as a weapon was crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Did she say how she'd do that? No, but she was really intense about it. It scared me a little. That night, after Nina had gone to bed in Lyra's guest room, I sat at the kitchen table and planned my next move. Aven wanted to threaten my relationship with my daughter? Fine. It was time to show her what a real threat looked like. Monday morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the courthouse. I spent 2 hours in the records office researching property deeds, business licenses, and court filings. What I found was fascinating. Rex Harrow's real estate empire was built on some very creative financing arrangements. Not illegal necessarily, but the kind of deals that would make investors nervous if they knew all the details. More interesting was what I found about Aven's law firm. They'd been involved in several of Rex's property deals over the years, which meant Aven had been professionally connected to Rex long before their affair began. That evening, I called Janet Reeves again. Janet, I need to ask you about something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay. How long has Aven been working on Rex Harrow's legal matters? A long pause. Keaton, I really shouldn't be discussing client business. Janet, my wife has been having an affair with this man while handling his legal work. If there's something unethical going on, I need to know about it. Another pause. There might be some conflicts of interest involved. The senior partners have been asking questions. What kind of questions? About whether Aven disclosed her personal relationship with Mr. Harrow when she was assigned to his cases. About whether that relationship influenced her professional advice. And what's the answer? The answer is that Aven's in serious trouble. The State Bar Association is starting an investigation. I hung up and smiled for the first time in weeks. Aven's career was about to implode, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The next morning, I called Detective Collins. Detective, this is Keaton Merren. I wanted to follow up on our conversation about Rex Harrow. What about it? I've been doing some research, and I think you might be interested in what I found. I spent 20 minutes walking Detective Collins through Rex's financial arrangements and Aven's professional involvement with his business. I was careful to present everything as concerned citizen information, not as part of any personal vendetta. This is interesting, Detective Collins said when I finished. "We'll look into it." "I appreciate that." "Mr. Merren? You didn't hear this from me, but Mr. Harrow called us again yesterday. He seems to think you're conducting some kind of harassment campaign against him." "Am I under investigation?" "No, but I'd be careful if I were you. Mr. Harrow has connections in this town." "So do I, Detective. So do I." That afternoon, Aven called me for the first time in a week. "What did you do?" Her voice was shaky, desperate. "I don't know what you mean." "The Bar Association called me this morning. They're opening an ethics investigation." "That's unfortunate." "Don't play dumb with me, Keaton. I know you're behind this." "I'm behind you sleeping with your client? That's an interesting theory." "You reported me." "I reported facts. What you did with those facts was your choice." "This will destroy my career." "Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided Rex was more important than your marriage." "Please, I'm begging you, call them back and tell them you were mistaken." "I wasn't mistaken, Aven. You had an affair with a client while handling his legal matters. That's exactly what happened." "I'll do anything. I'll give you whatever you want in the divorce. I'll stay away from Rex permanently. Just please don't let them destroy everything I've worked for." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "You should have thought about that before you threatened my daughter." "What? I never—" "Nina told me about your conversation, Aven, about how you'd make sure she never spoke to me again if I didn't stop destroying your life. I was upset. I didn't mean it. You meant it, just like you meant every cruel thing you said about me to Rex. Just like you meant it when you decided I was too disgusting to touch." "Keaton, please." "No, Aven, you made your choices. Now you get to live with the consequences." I hung up and turned off my phone. Outside, the sun was setting behind the industrial buildings that surrounded Lyra's warehouse. In the distance, I could see the lights of the city center, where Aven was probably sitting in her office, watching her carefully constructed life fall apart. It felt good. Better than good. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. The call came at 6 in the morning on a Thursday. Lyra answered her phone with the groggy irritation of someone who hadn't had her coffee yet. "What?" she snapped into the receiver. I watched her face change as she listened to whoever was on the other end. Her expression shifted from annoyed to alert to something that might have been satisfaction. "When?" she asked. "How bad?" She listened for another minute, then hung up and turned to me. "That was my friend Marcus, who works at the newspaper. Rex Harrow was arrested last night." I set down my coffee mug. "For what?" "Financial fraud. Something about falsifying loan applications and using shell companies to hide debt. Apparently, the investigation you triggered led to a much bigger discovery." "What about Aven?" "Not arrested, but she's been suspended from the law firm pending the outcome of the ethics investigation. And since she was the attorney of record on several of Rex's questionable deals, she might be facing charges too." I leaned back in my chair and absorbed this information. 3 weeks ago, I'd been a pathetic husband whose wife found him disgusting. Now I was watching that same wife's world crumble in real time. "How do you feel?" Lyra asked. "Like I'm just getting started." My phone rang. Aven's name appeared on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. It rang again, immediately, and again. On the fourth call, I answered. "What do you want, Aven?" "Rex was arrested." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I heard. They think I was involved in his business dealings. They're saying I helped him commit fraud." "Did you?" "No, I handled some of his legal work, but I didn't know he was doing anything illegal." "But you were sleeping with him while you handled his legal work. That's going to make your claims of innocence harder to believe. This is all your fault. If you hadn't reported me to the Bar Association, none of this would have happened. If you hadn't been having an affair with your client, none of this would have happened. I need a lawyer, Keaton, A good one. And I can't afford the kind of attorney I need because you froze our accounts. Sounds like a personal problem. Please, I know you hate me right now, but we were married for 15 years. That has to count for something. I thought about it for a moment. 15 years of marriage. 15 years of building a life together, of shared dreams and mutual support. 15 years that she'd thrown away for a few months of excitement with a man who was now facing federal charges. It counted for something, I said, right up until you decided I was disgusting. I was angry. I said things I didn't mean. No, Aven, you said things you did mean. You just didn't think I'd ever hear them. I hung up and turned off my phone. She wants money for a lawyer, I told Lyra. Are you going to help her? What do you think? Lyra smiled and went back to her painting. This latest canvas showed a woman in a business suit sinking into quicksand while reaching desperately toward a man who was walking away. Subtle as always, I said. I'm documenting a moment in history. Over the next few days, the story dominated local news. Rex Harrow's arrest had exposed a web of financial crimes that went back years. Properties had been purchased with falsified loan applications, investors had been defrauded through shell companies, and tax obligations had been hidden through creative accounting that bordered on criminal. Aven's role in the scandal was still unclear, but her name appeared in enough documents to make her a person of interest in the investigation. The local newspaper ran a series of articles about the case, and Aven's photo appeared alongside Rex's in several of them. The effect on her reputation was devastating. She'd spent years building an image as a successful ethical attorney, and now she was being portrayed as either a corrupt lawyer or a naive fool who'd been manipulated by her lover. Either way, her career was finished. My phone continued to ring regularly, Aven calling to beg for help, threaten legal action, or just cry into the voicemail. I didn't answer any of the calls, but I listened to the messages. They painted a picture of a woman who was finally understanding what it felt like to lose everything. On Friday evening, Nina called. Dad, have you seen the news? About Rex and Aven? Yeah, I've seen it. Is it true? Was Aven really involved in all that illegal stuff? I don't know how much she knew about what Rex was doing, but she definitely crossed some ethical lines. She called me yesterday crying. She wanted me to ask you to help her. What did you tell her? I told her that maybe she should have thought about consequences before she decided to cheat on my dad. I smiled. Nina was growing up fast. How are you handling all this? I asked. I'm okay. It's weird, you know? I always thought Aven was so perfect, so put together. Finding out she's just as messed up as everyone else is kind of liberating. Nobody's perfect, sweetheart. Some people are just better at hiding their flaws. Are you happy about what's happening to her? It was a good question. Was I happy? Or was this something else entirely? I'm satisfied, I said finally. She hurt me deliberately, and now she's facing consequences for her choices. That feels like justice. Do you think she'll go to prison? I don't know. Maybe. But even if she doesn't, her career is over. She'll have to start her whole life again from scratch. Like you did. Like I did. After I hung up, I sat in Lyra's kitchen and thought about the past month. 4 weeks ago, I'd been a broken man whose wife found him disgusting. Tonight, I was someone who'd fought back and won. But winning felt different than I'd expected. There was satisfaction, yes, but also a kind of emptiness. The anger that had sustained me through the worst of this was fading, leaving behind something that felt almost like sadness. Second thoughts? Lyra asked, joining me at the table with 2 glasses of wine. Not exactly. Just trying to figure out what comes next. What do you want to come next? I want to rebuild my life, find someone who actually wants to be with me, maybe travel a little, see some places I've never been. Sounds like a good plan. What about you? Are you going to stay in this warehouse forever? Lyra looked around the cluttered space that had been her home for the past 3 years. I've been thinking about that, actually. I got a call yesterday from a gallery in Denver. They're interested in my recent work. The dark stuff? Apparently there's a market for paintings about revenge and betrayal. Who knew? We sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking wine and listening to the sounds of the city outside. Somewhere out there, Aven was probably sitting in the house we'd shared, trying to figure out how to salvage something from the wreckage of her life. I didn't feel sorry for her. But I didn't feel the burning hatred I'd carried for weeks either. She'd made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. That was how the world was supposed to work. Saturday morning brought one final surprise. I was working on my truck in Lyra's parking area when a police car pulled up. Detective Collins got out and walked over to me. "Mr. Merren, how are you doing?" "Fine, Detective. What can I do for you?" "I wanted to update you on the Harrow case. The investigation you helped trigger has led to some significant arrests." "I'm glad I could help." "Mr. Harrow is going to prison for a long time. The financial crimes were extensive, and he's not going to be able to buy his way out of this one." "What about Aven?" "Your wife, ex-wife, she's not being charged criminally, but the State Bar Association is going to revoke her license. She'll never practice law again." I nodded and went back to work on the truck's engine. "Mr. Merren, can I ask you something?" "Sure. How much of this did you plan?" I looked up at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you came to me with information about Rex Harrow's business dealings at exactly the right time to maximum damage to both him and your ex-wife. That's either incredible timing or careful planning. Sometimes the truth has a way of coming out at the right moment." Detective Collins smiled. "Sometimes it does. Well, I wanted you to know that justice was served. Have a good day, Mr. Merren." He got back in his car and drove away, leaving me alone with my truck and my thoughts. That evening, Aven called one last time. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up the phone. "Hello, Aven." "I'm leaving town," she said. Her voice was flat, emotionless. "I wanted you to know." "Where are you going?" "I don't know yet. Somewhere I can start over." "That's probably for the best." "I'm sorry, Keaton, for all of it. You deserved better than what I gave you." "Yes, I did. I hope you find happiness." "I already have." She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there holding the phone for a moment, then set it down and went to find Lyra. She was in her studio, working on a new painting. This one was different from the others, brighter, more hopeful. It showed a man walking away from a burning building, his face turned toward a sunrise in the distance. "New direction?" I asked. "I think I'm done with the revenge series," she said. "Time to paint something more optimistic." "I like it." "Good, because I'm thinking about calling it New Beginnings." I put my arm around her shoulders and watched her work. Outside, the sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere out there, Aven was packing her belongings and preparing to start her life over in a place where nobody knew about her mistakes. But that was her story now, not mine. My story was just beginning. 3 months later, I was standing in the garage of my new house, a small place on the other side of town, far from the neighborhood I'd shared with Aven, when Nina called with news. "Dad, I heard from one of Aven's old friends. She's working as a paralegal in Phoenix, making about a quarter of what she used to make." "How's she doing?" "Apparently not great. She's living in a studio apartment and driving a 10-year-old car. I hope she's learned something from all this. Do you ever think about her?" I considered the question. Did I think about Aven? Sometimes, usually when I was doing something that reminded me of our life together. But the thoughts were distant now, like memories of someone I used to know rather than someone who'd once been the center of my world. "Sometimes," I said, "but not with anger anymore, more like curiosity, I guess. Wondering if she understands why everything fell apart the way it did." Do you think she does? I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe she's convinced herself that she was the victim in all this. Would it matter if she was sorry? Really? Genuinely sorry? I thought about it for a moment. No, I don't think it would. Some things can't be fixed with apologies. Are you happy, Dad? I looked around my garage, at the tools organized exactly the way I liked them, at the truck I was restoring because I wanted to, not because I needed the distraction. Through the window, I could see Lyra in the garden, planting flowers that would bloom in the spring. Yeah, I said, I'm happy. And I was. Not the desperate, grasping happiness of someone trying to convince himself that everything was fine, but the quiet, solid contentment of someone who'd fought for what he deserved and won. Aven had called me disgusting, said she'd rather kiss our dog than me. She'd thrown away 15 years of marriage for a few months of excitement with a man who was now serving federal time. But in the end, she'd done me a favor. She'd forced me to remember who I was before I became the man she found so repulsive. She'd pushed me to fight for myself, to value myself, to demand better. The man she'd left was weak, desperate, willing to accept scraps of affection from someone who held him in contempt. The man I'd become was stronger, smarter, and surrounded by people who actually wanted him around. I'd lost a wife who despised me and gained a life worth living. That sounded like a pretty good trade to me.